In this series of lessons, I want to introduce you to the Perl programming language. We will start with what is Perl and then go through a series of introduction videos on how to use Perl in the basic levels, and then we'll move on to some advanced lessons on how to use Perl for some advanced features. Perl is a programming language, and the beauty about Perl is it is an extremely small and lightweight program and extremely easy to use and extremely practical. It's also very modular, and there are thousands of scripts and modules already written for Perl, so you don't have to start from scratch. You could simply piggyback on some of these scripts and modules and start developing your own programs. Now, Perl was designed as a text manipulation programming language, but nowadays it's used by system administrators, it's used for web development, it's used for network programming, GUI development, and many more. As I mentioned, it's extremely lightweight and also doesn't have a huge fingerprint. The beauty about Perl, it's an object-oriented programming language, so it's very modular and already readily available on the Linux environment and the Mac operating system. If you wanted to then go on to install it on a PC, you could use something called Strawberry Perl and download that from the Perl website. So if we have the Ubuntu server here, and I'll be doing most of my Perl programming on this Ubuntu server. Let's look at how we can get our version of Perl on our machine, and it's very simple to do on your Ubuntu server by typing in perl-v, and that will give you the version number of Perl installed on this machine. Now, if you wanted to download it later on, you could go to the Perl website and get that. So, perl-v will give me the version of Perl. So here you can see this is Perl version 18, and it's the version I'll be using on this Ubuntu server to do most of the Perl programming. There are a couple other releases after this one. I think version 5.22 or 2.1. Not so stable at the moment, so I'm going to be sticking with version 18 for now, 5.18.2, and that will be the version we'll use. There's not much of a difference between the two versions, but let's use the most stable release so I can show you exactly how we use Perl to write our programs. Now, if you, for whatever reason, don't have Perl on your machine, we can go to the Perl website. So let's just go to the Perl website and I'll show you where you can download that. So it's perl.org, and there's a link called download. I can click on this. As you'll see here on the Windows, you can download Strawberry Perl. On the Mac operating system, it's already included, and Unix and Linux, it's already installed. So you don't have to install it. If you don't have it installed, you can simply click on the link here which says download latest stable, and that will get you the installation for the version for your machine. Now, if I want to download it manually, I type in apt-get install Perl, and that will go through an installation process of then downloading the Perl from the perl.org website and install it on my machine. Now, once that's done, I can simply type in perl-v to see the version, and you'll notice that it is the same version 18 as we had already installed it. So if you don't have Perl on your machine, on your Linux-based operating system, you can type in apt-get install Perl, and that will install it onto your operating system. Now, all the modules, all the scripts that are necessary for Perl can also be obtained from the CPAN network. The CPAN network has a whole range of modules and scripts, and the latest release of Perl already there. So you simply have a database of resources already available. We'll be going through that in future lessons, but for now, just know that the modules and scripts are readily available on the CPAN website, which now will have all the necessary files required latest releases, latest modules, latest scripts that you could simply use in your Perl programs. Now, to then go on to create our first program, let's look at the typical Hello World program and how we do that. So to actually just print the words Hello World onto the screen, that's what I'm going to show you now. We want to type in, and you can use Nano or Vim. I'll be using Vim for this tutorial. It's just a text editor. You can use your favorite text editor. It doesn't matter. So I type in VIM space. We will call this file hello.pl, PL being the extension for the Perl program. And once I type that in and I hit the enter key, that'll open up a text editor with the hello.pl file. Now I need to use the shebang statement in the first line, which is the path name for where the Perl programming language is. So I do that by typing hash, exclamation mark, / the path name USR /bin/Perl. That will be the path name for the file. And then we just type in print, inverted commas, hello world, in quotes. And at the end of every piece of code, we need to put a semicolon to indicate that this is the end of that particular line of code. Now let's go in and save this file. And I still need to do one more thing, which is give this permission execution rights. So chmod +X to that particular file, hello.pl. Now I'll be able to execute the file. So now I simply type in Perl and then the file name hello.pl, and you'll see it shows hello world. What it doesn't have though is a break at the end of the line, so hello world's on its own. So let's go back to the editor and make one small modification to this print command. So I scroll to the hello world section and I'm going to put in / and the letter N, which indicates a line break. So let's type that in again, and now you'll see when I run the program, it shows hello world in its own line, and then after that in the next line shows us the command line prompt. So in this quick video, we've been able to show an overall introduction to Perl, explain what Perl is, and even been able to demonstrate how to write our first Hello World program. You can also run the Perl program by typing in // and then the file name. So / hello.pl, and it will use the Perl interpreter to know how to run this particular program. So that's another way you can use without having to type in Perl and then the file name. Let's go back into the editor, and what I want to show you here is more on how we can use some commenting. Let's print a few more things in this particular version. Now, Perl borrows a lot of its features from languages like awk, AWK, the other programming language SED, SED. We also have Perl borrowing from programs like the Bash language, the C language, etc. There are some differences and fundamental differences that we'll discuss later on, but let's look at how we can print a few things on here and practice a little bit so you get an idea of how to use some of the basics in Perl. Well, let's move on to some basic commenting. An extremely important feature in Perl is the commenting feature, which is a little bit different from some of the other languages. And to do that, we put a hash. And now, excuse my spelling mistakes. I'm actually purposely doing this to make sure you understand that this is not interpreted by the actual Perl programming. So this is a comment. If I type in the file name again and run it, you see the hello world appears and completely ignores any of the comments, even though I have spelling errors in here. Now, if you have the option of having multiple lines, commenting is very useful for some of your code when you want someone else to read your code and understand what you were doing in that particular section. So by writing a comment allows someone to follow along with your thinking at that particular time. It's also useful for you when you revisit your code after a period of time to understand what were you trying to do in this particular section. So it helps you and saves you a lot of time trying to figure out later on why you wrote the code in that particular way. So in Perl, to do the commenting section, we start with the hash. For example, this is a comment, but if you want to write additional lines, we do it in this following way. We type in equals in the next line, and then you can type in some of your comments, and then you end it by equals to cut, which would then indicate the end of the comment section. So if I have multiple lines here, I can type in, let's say, begin. So in the next line, I can type in something along the lines like this is document. I will be running a Hello World program, and I'm purposely making some spelling mistakes here so you can actually see this is my first Perl program. Again with some spelling mistakes. So you will see now when I run this program, you will see that it only prints the hello world, and everything between the equals begin and equals cut section will be ignored, and it will only print the hello world and not throw any errors because we have the comment section included here. So all this will be excluded by the program, will not be run by the Perl binary file, and basically only be there for someone to read at a later stage. So let's go in and run this program so you can actually see how that actually works. There is a significant difference between Python, for example, and Perl. Python is very dependent on the indentation. With Perl, it doesn't matter how much white space, how much of indentation there is. It doesn't matter. As you'll see when I run this, it just prints hello world. So just remember, indentation is not critical or not important in Perl at all, as opposed to something like Python. So if I go in here and let's see how we can use the single quotes and some of the differences with single quotes. So let's go in and print hello world exactly as it is we had in the previous line, but let's do it with single quotes. So hello world \n, and let's see the difference that happens when we print this command out. Now let's run the program and see what the differences are. So if I type in the run command, you'll notice that hello world appears first, and the second one with the single quotes has printed the /n as part of the string. So something to note is that only double quotes can interpret variables and special characters and run them properly. Single quotes just prints it as a part of the string. So if you wanted to interpret some variables or some special characters, you need to put it within the double quotes. So let's look at how we can use some variables and some numbers in this program. Let's go into the next line, and we will type in the variable name, which would be the variable a, for example. And let's go in and declare that variable with a $sign. So $a, and let's give it a value. Let's look at 15. So $a equals 15, integer value of 15, 1, 5. And now if we want to print that out, we need to put a semicolon on the end. I forgot that here, so I'll put that semicolon here as well. And it might give you an error sometimes, but just get consistent with your semicolons. Print, open quotes. Let's print that capital A equals, and let's put in the variable $A. So it should print out the $A value in the print statement. So A equals 15. Let's put a semicolon. As I said here, we need to put the semicolon on the end to make sure it runs as a program command and not throw any errors. Now let's save that file and let's run the program. So if I do it this time, I'm typing in Perl this time. I could have done the /, but Perl and the file name, hello world. Notice that it's got hello world /n and it's got A equals 15 printed here. Obviously not formatted correctly, so I'm going to go back into the actual program, and what I'll do is let me comment this line out. So I do that by putting a hash in front of it to make sure it's not visible by the code. Let's run it again, and let's see. You see now it says A equals 15. It hasn't given us a line break again, so we can obviously make changes in the actual code by going in here and putting in a \n to give that the clarity, and you can see them quite neatly then. So /n. And I wanted to show you one more thing here, which is how to print special characters. So to print special characters, I can simply go in to the double quotes, but this way I can use the \, and then anything after that \, will be printed. So for example, if I type in print, and let's put in the double quotes, and within the double quotes, I want to print a single double quote. So just one part of the double quote. So I do that by typing in print. Let's open the double quotes and have the closed double quotes here as well. And within that, I put in a \, and let's put in another double quote sign. So basically it's double quotes / double quotes and close double quotes to then indicate the end. And let's look at what happens when we run this program. So basically that / indicates that anything after that we want it to actually print on the screen. So let's run this, and you will see now that it will print A equals 15, and you'll see here there is a double quote. It doesn't have the line break, so let's go in and add that line break in here to make sure that we can actually see it clearly. So I do \n to then indicate a line break, and let's have a look at what happens now when we run this program. If you notice now, it has the hello world A equals 15 and then puts the double quotes in its own line. And this is how you are able to print special characters. If you need to print them out, you use the \. Perl is a little different than many other languages in that you don't have to explicitly define whether you are using an integer or whether you're using a array or a variable, etc. So you just simply need to use some specific characters when you're using variables and when you're using arrays. Now in this lesson, I'll introduce you to a couple different functions within Perl, and we'll print that to screen so you can actually see how that works. Now when you want to declare a variable, you use the $symbol, $A equals 15, and that declares it as an integer. And when we print that, it then prints that out as the integer. But if I want to use an array, I need to use the at symbol. So I use the at a command, and then I can use it as an array. So just like I'm typing here now, at a, and anything after that would be part of an actual array. So for now, I just want to explain variables and explain arrays, but that's how the significant difference between declaring a variable and declaring an array works. Now let's go on to some other parts of what I want to show you in this lesson, and let's go in and declare another variable. So let's call this variable $a as a string equals, and let's put the double quotes. Importantly, you need to use the double quotes, and let's call this is a string, and I want to put in a semicolon on the end to make sure there's no error here, and I want to print $a, again in inverted commas, double quotes, to make sure that we actually run what's within that double quotes, so you avoid any problems in this instance. So let's print that and see whether that actually prints the command to the screen. I need to put the /n to have the line space. So let's run this and let's see what happens. As I expected, Perl requires the semicolon to be included in your code. So I am missing a couple semicolons, just used to programming in some other languages like Python and even iOS, and that's why I continually forget about the semicolons. So let's put some semicolons in here, and let's see if that works now. Let's save that file and run that, and that should work and give us the proper output as we wanted. There we see this is a string has been printed. Now let's go back into the editor again. You will note the difference in the variable when it's an integer and a string. The only difference between a string in a variable is that it is in double quotes. So when you're using a string, you need to make sure it is in double quotes, and that will allow it to be declared as a string. So let's look at a couple other special characters. One, which is the \u, which will then allow underlining to occur. So let's do that now, and let's declare the variable, and we do it this way. So $a equals inverted commas, and let's put in this is a string, but this time I'm going to change everything after is, or everything after this actually, with a \u, which will then mean everything after the \u will be converted into uppercase letters. Now let's go and save that, and let's run this program, and let's make sure it works as we say. But let's print this, print $a in double quotes, and that should allow us to print. Put a carriage return /n for a new line, and as we see here, if I run this program, it will tell me this is a string, and notice is a string is now in capital letters because of the \u. There are other backslash letters, for example \l will give you all lowercase after the \l. There's \r, which gives a carriage return. There's \t, which then allows a tab to be inserted in the line, or about 4 spaces. Just some additional features in Perl that are very handy when you are creating your programs. Now let's go back into the actual program, and let's add a few more things and show you a couple other functions that we can use in Perl. Let's look at how we can declare a floating point in a variable. It's quite simple actually. We just simply type in $a equals and the number 24.5, for example, that floating point, and that's basically it. That's all you need to do to declare a floating point in a variable. Let's go in and print that to the screen. So in the next line, I simply type in print. I need to use the double quotes properly and put in the $a within the quotes. And for ease of reading, I'll put in a new line character, which is \n, which then allows us to see that in its own line. So $a \n will print that to the screen. And let's look at an array. I'm going to use a simple array here of maybe 3 names. And to do that, instead of using the $sign, I use the @ sign. So let's call this @names. And let's think of a couple names and we put it as equal to. We need to open brackets. And within that brackets, I need to be very careful about using the quotation marks correctly, the double quotes. So let's use Tom in double quotes. You just want to make sure when you're looking at your code that you see if there are any errors. I use a comma, and let's use another name like Tony in double quotes. And let's use a third name like Mona, M-O-N-A, which would then give us 3 names in this array: Tom, Tony, and Mona. Now, I need to put a semicolon on the end of that. And if I want to then get, for example, Tony out of this array, I need to do it the following way. I need to print, and then I need to go into double quotes, and I need to put in $, names, and from names I need to use square brackets and select the number in the array that I want to choose. In this case, remember, arrays start from the number 0. So Tom would be 0, Tony would be 1, Mona would be 2. So I need to put in square brackets and the number 1 in that, and then close the brackets. So square brackets, 1, close square brackets within quotes, and then I need to put a semicolon on the end of that to make sure the code is going to be okay, and I put the \n to make sure that it does appear in a new line. Now if I go into my code and save this, and let's go to the command line, and as I expected, I must have missed a semicolon somewhere. Let's go back into the code, and we'll see that yes, in this particular line just above names, I need to put a semicolon in here. And I save this file now, and let's have a look at the results. Now you'll see it tells me 24.5, and then it reports back that Tony is the name in that particular array, which is in position 1. So as you can see, this is how we use arrays in Perl. You have to be very cautious with the double quotes and the brackets, and once you get a hang of it, you will be able to manage this quite comfortably. So again, one thing you need to notice, don't make the mistake as I'm making of the semicolons. You need to make sure you use the semicolons correctly. Now let's go in, and what if we wanted to add 2 numbers or multiply 2 numbers? So let's declare variables again, and let's declare variable number 1. So num1 equals 10 and $num2 equals 2. If I wanted to add these 2 numbers, I would do it in the following way. If I wanted to do this, I can simply do $sum equals $num1 plus $num2. And that value would be stored in the variable sum. And then all I needed to do was print sum to the screen, and that would give me the sum. Let's put the semicolons in as we need to. and I probably will make a few mistakes before the end of this lesson, but just to be consistent, let's use the semicolons. Now I want to print the sum to the screen. So let's print $sum, and that would give me the total of number 1 and number 2. Let's do the new line return, and let's see if this works now. And as you can see, 10 plus 2 is now 12. If I want to do multiplication, let's go in and do some multiplication now. So I can then declare another variable, and in this case I will do dollar, and let's call this mul, mul, multiply equals $num1 multiplied, use the shift 8, the asterisk sign, $num2, and that will store the value of number 1 times number 2 in the multiplication variable. So let's put in $mul, and let's do the carriage return again, /n, and let's print out and see how this works. And as you'll see here, if we then run this program, there's a semicolon missing. Let's go back in and fix that up. There's 2 lines here that I haven't included the semicolon in. So let's put that semicolon, semicolon. Let's save this. And you'll see now it has 12, and after 12 it shows 20, which is 10 multiplied by 2. And that's how you do multiplication. If you want to do subtraction, you use the minus sign, and if you want to use the division, you use the / sign. So that's just the couple arithmetic operations you can do within Perl. In some instances, you may want to print something, a string, in multiple lines. To do that, we define a variable as a string. So $str equals, now instead of using the double quotes, we use single quotes in this instance. So single quote, and let's start putting in a string. So let's call this one, this is a multi-line string. Now all I've done is put single quote and then a close quote at the bottom, but I've used multiple lines and a semicolon on the end, and then I just need to print open quotes with a double quotes this time, $str, and then close the quotes with a semicolon on the end. I'll just add the \n to create a new line, and when I run this file now, you will see it says this is a multi-line string, and each line has got some words in it. So that's the way you do multi-line strings. I also want to show you how we print the file name and the line number. To do that, we type in print, and there's a specific command that we want to use for the file name, and I'll just paste that in and you'll get an idea how that actually works. You'll see here when I paste it in, it will say file colon, and then there is this underscore file, and then underscore again, and I put in the line return. Let's save that and see what happens. It's missing something. Let me go back in here and just double check, and what it is missing is a extra double quotes. We have only 3 here, and I need to put one just before the backspace. Let me go in and correct that. It wasn't the semicolon this time, but again, you have to be careful with your double quotes. I need to put the double quotes in here just before the backslash, and if I save the file this time, it should print out the file name correctly. So I'll just type in // and hello.pl, and as you can see in the last line it says file, and the name of the actual file. To then go in and print the line number, I go back into the editor and I copy the last line. And in this instance, instead of being called file, I'm going to change that to line. So copy this and let's just paste this in the next line. And I just changed this word file to line. If I wanted to, I would have changed the description as well, but it's here. You'll see it says file hello.pl. It says file, which should say line, but the line number is actually correct. So in this way, we are able to show the file name and the line number that you're working on all from within Perl. So let's move on and work more with arrays. So for that, let's just go back to the hello.pl file. And within that file, we had looked at an array called names previously. And what we had done was put in 3 elements, Tom, Tony, and Mona. And here we had Tom within quotes, Tony within quotes, and Mona also within quotes. And what we did to separate them was put a comma between them. So that was the way we stored 3 values in this array called names with a inverted commas and a comma. There's another way we can do that, and for this we're going to type in array, so arr equals, and we'll use a different command this time called qw. And with qw, all I need to do then is just type in the double slashes, and within those double slashes I put in Tom, Tony, and Mona separated by a white space. So I didn't use any commas in this instance. All I've done is put in a single space character, and the QW will allow us to store the 3 values in this array now without quotes and without the commas. So it will produce the same result as we had in the step before for the names array, but this time we just use QW, a slash, the 3 names separated by a space, and then a slash again. So let's have a look at what the results look like when we print these results. What we will do is print each element out. So we type in print, and we'll take the 3 spots, array 0, array 1, and array 2, and print those out in the results section. So let's have a look at what we do here. We type in ARR, so dollar, ARR, and square brackets for position 0. And then we want to copy this to the next line, so we can print the next value, which is array 1, the value that is in the first position. I'll put in the /n to give it a new line. So let's print array 1, and we'll print array 2 as well. So I'll copy these twice, change the values here from 0 to 1 and then to 2. So 0, 1, and 2. So let's go ahead and run this. And oh, I know what I've done. I've forgotten to remove the equals to sign. So let's go back here, remove the equals in these 3 lines. Apologies for that. You don't need equals when you print. Now when we run it, we will see that it gives us Tom, Tony, and Mona in the results here. What I also wanted to show you was how we use negative numbers to display different array positions. So let's go ahead back to the code, and within this code you would have noted that we've got for position 0, position 1, position 2, it prints the first element, then the second element, and then the third element. But if we wanted to talk about characters in reverse order, we do it in the following way. Instead of print array 0, array 1, and array 2, we want to print -0, -1, -2. And I'll explain how that works shortly, but let's display the results. So this 2, I'm going to change this to -2. And similarly with the 1, I'm going to change that to -1. And for the 0, we'll include it as -0, just to give you an idea what it looks like when we run the code. So when I run the code this time, notice how we have, from the previous results and this result, we have Tom, Mona, and Tony. And previously we had Tom, Tony, and Mona. So you can see that the order has changed. Tom, Mona, Tony. We now have, in the previous example, Tom, Tony, Mona. So the order has changed, and let me show you how that order has been changed, because we have used negative numbers. The use of negative numbers then means that we are calculating the position based in reverse order. So from the end of the array, we are printing the -1 spot, which is the last spot. The -2 spot is the second last spot, and -0 is just classified as 0, which gives us the first position. That's why we get the order Tom, Mona, and Tony. Let's go back to the code and look at how we can use a different type of array. In this case, an array that stores a sequence of different things. So for example, if I was going to put in an array, and let's assume we wanted to calculate or work out an array of a list of numbers, I can do it in this way. Array equals, open brackets, 1 with a double dot after the 1, and let's do 20 to give us a list of 1 to 20. Now let me run this code so you can see that numbers are being printed, and then I'll explain to you how the results are obtained. So let's go ahead and run this code, save the file, and then run the code, and we will see that it starts printing some numbers. You will see that it has number 1, and then it has 20, and then it has 19 as well. So what we want to do now is have a look at how this code was interpreted. So if you look at the print section here, it prints 0, which is position 1, the first position. -1 is the last position, and -2 is the second last position. Let's go back to the code, and you'll see that it prints out 1, 20, and 19. Now we're going to go ahead and see whether this code can store a series of letters. We'll go ahead and edit this file again, and this time what I'm going to do is put in another array, but this time alphabetically from A to Z. So let's look at what happens when we do it this way. We want this to store the letters A to Z. If I run this program now, notice how it has A, Z, and Y. The first element, then the last element, and then the second last element, because we had print array 0, -1, and -2. What I want to do now is just modify these arrays to then have a proper ordering, and then we'll be able to go ahead and do some additional modifications to this code. Now what we've seen is 3 different types of arrays here. We've looked at a series array, we've looked at the QW array, and then we looked at the array that stored values with quotation marks separated by a comma. I will just quickly change these arrays to array 1, 2, and 3. And what we want to do this time is calculate the total length of the array, which has the letters A to Z. So instead of printing now, what I first need to do is declare a new variable. To declare a new variable, we want to classify a variable. Let's call it length. So let's call it $len for length. and let's give it the value equals array 3. So what we're saying is the length of this variable will be the length of array 3. Now I want to print array 3, which will then give us the length, which will be the values A to Z and counted. So let's have a look at that. Print $len, and let's have a look at the results this time. Just put a new line in here so we don't have lines repeating or values repeating in the same line. And let's run the code this time. So what we've done is classified $len equals the values of array 3, and let's run that, and we should get a value, as we see here, a value of 26, which means it's calculated or counted the letters A to Z and given us a value of 26. So in this way, we are able to calculate the length of an array. So I'm just going to make some slight modifications here. We've looked at 3 different types of arrays, one with quotation marks and a comma, one with the QW, and then we've looked at a series as well. But now what happens if you want to remove a value from the array or add a value to an array? We look at 4 new functions: the push, pop, shift, and unshift commands. So what we want to do is go ahead and start looking at the push command, the pop command, and then we'll move on to shift and unshift. The push function allows us to add a value to the end of an array, and the pop function allows us to remove the value at the end of the array. So let's play around with array. We will look at array 1, which will be the names that we have: Tom, Tony, and Mona. And what we'll do is look at adding with the push function a value at the end of that array. To do that, we want to type in push, and then I'll show you that command, how we write the command successfully so that it adds a value to the end of the array. Let's go to a new line, and I'll simply type in push and pop in the next line. And what we'll do is then go ahead and define the function for push. So let's go back to the push function, and we'll type in for array 1. We want to add a value at the end of this particular array. So push, and within brackets, I type in array 1, ARR1, and I type in the value, which in this case could be a name called Bob. Let's look at calling the value Bob, and I need to put this in quotation marks so we don't have any errors. And let's put that, and what this then will do is add the value Bob to the end of the array. Now with the pop, what we'll do is also with array 1, we'll just type in array 1, and what that should do is then remove the last value from that array. Push and pop. Basically, pop will remove an element at the end of the array, and push will add a value to the end of an array. So just adding the value Bob to that list, and pop will then remove a value from the end of the array. We also have the other 2 functions called shift and unshift, and we'll go ahead and discuss those now, and then we'll look at the results that are obtained. So how shift and unshift work is that shift will remove an element from the beginning of the array, and unshift will add a value to the beginning of the array. So shift will remove something from the beginning of array 1, and unshift will then remove the value from the beginning of array 1. So the difference between push and pop and shift and unshift is push and pop work by adding and removing elements at the end of the array, and shift and unshift will basically remove an element from the beginning of the array, and unshift will add a value like Deborah to the beginning of the array. So it just depends how you want to manipulate or modify the array. You can add and remove values at the end of the array, and you can do similarly by adding or removing values in the beginning of the array. So in this video, we've looked at arrays, we've looked at the different types of arrays, we've also looked at how we can add values to the beginning of an array, remove values from the beginning of an array, add values to the end of an array, and remove values from the end of an array. Before I run this code, I want to comment certain lines of this code so that there are no mistakes that we misinterpret later on. So I'll comment the print statements here and make sure that these do not interfere with our results when we start looking at the pop and the push and the shift and unshift commands. So let me just comment a few more print statements here, and what we'll do is in the next video we'll start looking at the actual results obtained from this specific code. So make sure we have covered all the print statements, and now we'll move on to looking at the results. Now let's look at how the results look when we run the program. But before that, I just want to add a few print statements. So print array1, and I'll put in a new line here. What I'll also do is just comment out the line here where it says print $len. Let's comment that out. And what I'll also do here is put a semicolon. And what I'm going to do is basically print the whole array out. So let's look at what happens when we print the array out shortly. But what I'll also do is print the array out after every single step. So let's put in some lines here. And what I will also add here is a description of what it actually is doing. So let's put in push here, and then after the pop we'll do print pop the array, and then we'll also do that for the shift, and then we'll also do one for unshift. And now let me save this file after I type in unshift, and let's run the program, and let's have a look at what that does. So if I run the actual program and type in /hello.pl, you see push, pop, shift, unshift. But what I also want to do is just go in and add a initial line which shows us what the array looked like before we started playing around with all the push and pop statements. So I'll just add in the array, just print the array just before the push statement. So here I'll just type in array, and we'll save this file, and let's go on and see what the results look like now. So let's run the program. I have made a small typo in array, but that's not important. This is the original array, Tom, Tony, Mona. When we add the push command, Bob has appeared at the end of the array. We've pushed the value at the end of the array. When we use the pop command, it removes an entry from the end of the array, which now has removed Bob from that list. When we use the shift function, we notice that Tom has been removed from the array, from the beginning of that actual array. And when we use unshift, it now has added the value Deborah to the array. So Tom's not there anymore, but we have Deborah, Tony, and Mona. This is how we use the push, pop, shift, and unshift in our Perl scripting. Now let's go back to the program and let's make a few more modifications. Now, what if we wanted to store an array within another array? Let's go ahead and create a new array. In this case, let's call it array 4. So let me go into the code. Let's make a new line here and type in array 4. And what we want to do in this particular case is grab 10 values from another array. So array 4 equals, and let's put in this case array 2, and we'll put in the values 1 to 2. But basically what we're trying to say is from 1 to 20, we want the first 2 values. Let me make this more simple. Let's change this 1 to 10. So what we want to do is look at array 2. It has 20 elements in there, or 1 to 20. We want to grab the first 10 elements. To show you even better, I can go in and change this to array 3. And what we want to do in this case is say array 4 equals array 3. And let's change this to the first 10 elements. So I can call this 0 to 9. Remember to put your semicolons. And what you also need to make sure is print the array. And I can print array 4 in this manner. So just print array 4. And what this will do is print the first 10 results that have been obtained from array 3. So array 4 looks at array 3, looks at what the first 10 elements are, and then retrieves that and stores that in array 4. So we print array 4 colon at array 4. What I also need to make sure is I need to put the range operator, which is the double dots. So now it will take the values stored in the array 3, 0 to 9, so 1 to 10, the first 10 elements. And when I run this, you'll see array 4 now has the first 10 elements obtained from array 3. Basically, it's been able to slice the values from the initial array and put that into array 4. Let's go ahead and use another example. We have looked at a range of values with the double dot indicating a range, but let's go in and type in array 4 again. But this time we're going to look at array 3 and pick only the values like the 9th element, 10th element, and 11th element. So we do that by putting them in square brackets separated by commas. So 9, 10, 11 will retrieve the 3 elements from array 3 that are in position 9, 10, and 11. If we run the program this time, you will see it only has 3 values, J, K, and L, which are the 9th, 10th, and 11th element from array 3. In this way, we're able to either select a range of values from a large array and store it in a smaller array, or we can pick specific elements and store only those values in a new array. This is how we are able to break a very large array into smaller parts. This will be important when we use Perl for hacking and looking at how to go through big amounts of data and pull in the relevant information. Now let's move on and look at how we can do some other examples. Some examples could include how can we replace some elements in an array. So let's go ahead and comment some of these options out because we don't want to print too much to the screen. But what we want to do now is go into a particular array, maybe array 3, which has the values A through to Z. And what we do is take some of those elements out and replace it with different elements. And we use the function called splice. So to do that, let's go in and comment some of these sections out so we don't view unnecessary information. And what we want to do here is print array 3, but print before and then the after results. So to do that, we go in and type in splice, and we use the numbers 1 to 10. So to use splice, we use the following method. So we type in splice, and we are going to splice array 3. And what we want to do is replace a certain portion of array 3 with a new list of values. So splice array 3, and what I need to make sure is put that in brackets so we are consistent and not throw any errors. And what I want to do is put in an offset value of 0, which would be from the beginning of the array. And then I need to put in a length, which we can use 10. So the length of the change will be 10 values. So I put comma 10. And then what I want to do is put in what I want to replace those values with. So I'll put in 1 and the range character double dot and 10. So what we're saying here, we want to splice array 3 at the offset value 0 with a length of 10 and change it to 1 to 10. So the first 10 elements from A to J will be replaced with the values 1 to 10. We need to make sure we're consistent and make sure we put a semicolon at the end of this line. So I'll do that shortly. But the key here is this is how you use the splice command. So let's put in that semicolon as discussed. And also what I want to add here is the print option. So we want to print before the splice. So I'll copy that and also print after the splice. So let's go in and make sure array after splice, and we'll replace the first print command with array before splice to make sure we see the difference. So we should see the array 3 printed as it is initially, A to Z, and then what will happen after the splice. So let's run the code now and let's look at the results. As you'll notice here, we've got array before splice, A all the way to Z. And if you look at the first 10 values, A, B, up to J, has now been replaced with 1 to 10. And this is how we use the splice feature, and the rest of the characters are all the same. Just the 1 to 10 has replaced A to J. And that's how we use the splice. And this is all important when we start doing advanced techniques in Perl. Now let's look at how we can use the sorting ability in Perl. Sorting in ascending order, sorting in descending order, how to concatenate arrays together. We want to use the array which had the names in it, but what I'll also do is just add a few more names to array 1. So let's go in and add additional values there so we can actually see how the ascending and descending order works. So we'll add Alice and we'll add the value Bob in there. So it has Tom, Tony, and Mona right now. Let's go in and make some changes to some additional names because we want to see how the sorting actually works. So let's go here and type in Bob, and we'll type in Alice as one additional name. If you notice that this array now is in descending order already, the Tom, Tony, Mona, Bob, and Alice. And what we want to do now is print it in ascending order. To do that, we need to create a new array. So let's call this array 5, but the function is sort, and then we want to change the order of this array. So sort array 1, and we want to store this in array 5. So let's go in and say array 5 equals sort of array 1. And if we do that, then we can print the array 5. And let's make sure we store it in array 5 first. And then we'll go in and print to the screen. And we want to put in some comment that shows that we are printing this after sort. So let's go in and print the array 5 after the sort is complete. So I'll put in a line break, array after sort. Just fix that spelling mistake there. And we put in array 5. Once that's done, let's run this particular program and let's have a look at what the sorted results are. So let's go in and run the program, and we should see when we run the program that the list of values is now in ascending order. So we'll see that it will show, as we have listed here, Alice, Bob, Mona, Tom, and Tony. The previous order was in descending order, and after sort it now shows in ascending order. Now what if we want to concatenate two strings together? We do that by creating a new array, and we go into the code again, and this time we will call this one array 6. So let's go in here, let's find the appropriate point to put this. So let's go in and concatenate array 1 and array 5. So let's call it array 6 equals, and let's use array 1 and array 5. We do that by using them separated by commas. So let's do array 6 equals, and all we do here is open brackets, we put in array 1, and we separate it with array 5 with a single comma. So array 1, comma, array 5. Now what this will do is when we print this particular result, what we are doing is taking array 1, which is Tom, Tony, Mona, Bob, and Alice, and then putting that and adding on the array 5, which was the sorted results, which was Alice, Bob, Mona, Tony, and Tom. So what I want to do is just comment one print line here, and we'll call this array after adding or after concatenating. So we want to print array 6, and let's have a look at the results when we print that. We notice now after we've concatenated, it has Tom, Tony, Mona, Bob, Alice, and then Alice, Bob, Mona, Tom, and Tony. So what have we been able to do in this particular video? We've looked at concatenation in the last example, but we've looked at how we can sort arrays in ascending order. We also have looked at how to use the push, pop, shift, unshift. We have also looked at how to take a large array and break that into smaller arrays. We've looked at how to pick certain elements or range of elements from an array and put that into another array. We've also looked at how to pick specific elements like positions in a large array and only put that into a smaller array. But now, once we have finished with arrays, we want to move on and start working with conditional statements using the if and else statement, which we will now cover in the next videos. So as we have looked here, we have done a fair bit with arrays, and now let's move on and start working with the conditional statements. So now we want to start working with conditions, and to do that I open a new file and we'll call that conditions.pl. So vim conditions.pl. This opens a blank document, and within this document we need to write the first line, which is the shebang statement, which looks like hash and then the exclamation mark, and then we type in /usr user /bin, and then we type in Perl. Conditional statements in Perl will help us with decision making. So when we look at Perl conditional statements like if, else, and then we'll look at operators like equals to, not equal to, greater than, less than, we will be able to use these to make decisions. So we'll see how that actually works in Perl. We will go on to more advanced Perl scripting and commands in future videos, but for this particular video, we only want to focus on conditions. So what we're going to do is look at a variable, and we'll call that A. And what we'll then do is look at some if statements and work out whether the value is equal to or less than or greater than that particular value, and then print something to the screen based on that condition. You will also be introduced to the unless statement shortly, but for now, let's go ahead and look at the syntax for an if statement. An if statement will be written as if, and then we have the condition, which will be in normal brackets, and then we have curly brackets to show what needs to be executed if that condition is met. So as I said, we'll be using a variable a, and we will give the value of 5 to a, and then we will look at the if statement. So the syntax for the if statement will be written like this: if, and then we have the normal brackets, as I'll show you now, and then we have the curly brackets, as you'll see here now. So normal brackets first, and then the curly brackets. Within the normal brackets will be what test or condition we are looking at, and then based on that condition, we can then print a message to the screen or perform some sort of action. So we want the value or variable to be called a, and we do that by typing in $a equals, and as I said, we'll call this 5. And then what we want to do, put a semicolon at the end of that line just to make sure you don't forget that. And within the normal brackets, we want to put $a is less than 10. If the condition is met, because a is 5, then we will print something to the screen. So if $a is less than 10. So put the less than sign and then type in the number 10. We then want to print something to the screen, so I type in print, and let's put the brackets again, and within those brackets I'm going to put a quotation sign, open and close quotation. We'll put the variable a here, and what I want to do is put something before this, which again has to be in quotes. So a is less than 10. And then I want to put a colon and just display the value of a. And I also need to make sure that I put a new line here, so /n, and then I need to put a semicolon at the end of the line to indicate that the line is finished. Now, if this condition is true, then it's going to print this statement to the screen. So as we see, a is 5, and the condition says if a is less than 10, then print this to the screen. So let's go ahead and check if this works. So the first thing I need to do is change the permissions to this file. So I type in chmod, and I need to put +x and the file conditions.pl. Now I can run this particular file with the /conditions.pl command, and as you can see, a is less than 10, and it shows me the value of a, which is 5. So because we had given it a value of 5 and the condition is that it's less than 10, it has printed this statement. Now let's make this a little bit more complicated by adding an else statement into this program. So what we'll do here now is we've got a equals 5. The first condition says if a is less than 5 or less than 10, print this first message. Now what we want to do is say if it's not the case, then print a is not less than 10. So basically all it's doing is we've got a variable a defined with a value of 5, and then we're testing the first condition. If a is less than 10, print this, and if it's not less than 10, it'll run the else statement and then print a is not less than 10. And what I'll do now is change the value of a in a second after I type the print statement, which says print a is not less than 10. And I want to do the same as I had previously, but by putting the variable listed here and putting a new line. And then we'll go ahead and change the value of a to now be 15. And I want to make sure that I add a semicolon to the end of that print statement, or we will have an error. Once that's done, I can now exit this program, saving the file, and let's run the file this time, and let's have a look. A is not less than 10, and the value of a is now 15. So it has gone in and executed the else statement. So it's looked at a, realized that it's not less than 10 because it's 15. It's gone ahead, skipped that print statement, and then gone on to print the else statement, which a is not less than 10. And this is how we use if and else in Perl. It's very similar to other programs, but obviously we have to make sure we use the proper brackets and the semicolon, etc., to make sure the program does not throw any errors. Now let's look at how we can use else if in this program. So to do that, I can go ahead and put the else if before the else statement. So in this case, I'll type in else if like this, ELSIF, and we want to put the normal brackets again. And in this example, we want to test if a is greater than 15. I'll go ahead and change the value of a shortly, but for now, $a is greater than 15. And if this condition is met, we then want to print a message to the screen which says print a is greater than 15. So what we're doing here is we're first checking the first if condition. If it doesn't have that condition met, it goes to the else if and then checks if it's greater than 15 and then puts in a is greater than 15. We'll put in the value variable a again here with a new line, making sure we put a semicolon on the end. But we'll then go ahead and change the value of a to 16. Now this all looks okay. If this is all good, let's run the program this time and let's have a look at the results. If I then run the program, we will see that the output is now a is greater than 15 and shows us the value 16. So as you can see, it's now looked at the else if part of the condition and then run and executed that particular part. Now let's look at another else if statement, and in this instance let's look at what if a equals 15. So let's go ahead and copy this else if line and the print statement, and what we'll do is see whether we can check for the condition where a is 15. So we'll change the variable value shortly, but here I'll just put in $a equals 15. We are using the equality operator in this instance, and what we'll do is change the print statement to now say, I'll just adjust the value of a to 15 first, and then we'll say a is equal to 15. So I'll just remove some of these parts of the text equal to 15. So now what it's going to do is check whether it's less than 10, then greater than 15, and lastly equals to 15. So let's run the code this time, and as you can see, a is equal to 15. Because a is 15, we have looked at the first two conditions and it hasn't met those conditions, and then it's gone through to $a equals 15 using the equality operator, and then prints the message a is equal to 15. Now let's look at the unless statement, and the unless statement works on the premise that if a condition is false, then it will execute whatever is within the curly brackets. If the condition is true, it will skip the part within the curly brackets and go on to the next part outside the curly brackets. So what we want to do is here is change the if statement, and the unless statement is almost opposite to the if statement. If statement checks for something being true, then executes the part within the brackets or curly brackets. The unless statement will execute that only if the condition is false. So let's go ahead and type in unless a is less than 10. So unless variable a less than 10, as we have a equals 15, so the condition is going to be false. It's then going to print a message to the screen that says print a is not less than 10. So it should execute the portion within the curly brackets. So let's go ahead. We have a as 15. We're checking unless a is less than 10, then print the message that says a is not less than 10. And once that's done, I just need to make sure I comment out some of the sections that will cause an error if I don't remove that particular part. So let's just go ahead. A is not less than 10. And once that's done, we can go ahead and just make sure that some of these lines are commented so we don't have an error. Once that's done, we'll run the program and see whether it executes the part within the curly brackets. Let's go ahead and just make sure the code looks okay. It does look fine. A is 15. A is less than 10 is the unless condition. Now just comment these particular lines out so we don't have an error. The print a is less than 10 line and the curly brackets in the next line. Now let's run the code, and once we execute this code, we should see that a is not less than 10. I have a small typo in then, but the point is that it does work. Now let's go ahead and see if we can change the condition to now equal a value. So we go ahead and do that by changing the value of a. We'll change a to be 16, and we will check if the condition unless a is 15. Now let's make some adjustments to the code. Let's change the value in the unless to a equals 15, and in the print statement I'll say a is not equal to 15. And then what I need to also change is the value of a in the line for the variable of a. So as you can see here, it's going to check for the condition if a equals 15, and if that false condition works, it's going to print a is not equal to 15. So let's change the value of a to 16 as discussed. So now it's going to check if a equals 15. It's going to say that a is not 15, so it's going to go ahead and print a is not equal to 15. So the condition will be false, therefore print whatever is within the curly brackets. So let's run that, and as you can see here, it has produced the result that we want. a is not equal to 15 because a is 16 and the unless statement is checking for a value of 15. One thing I wanted to mention before moving on to switch statements and more if statements is that the else if statements that we have here are still valid and will still be executed if the condition is true. The unless statement will execute whatever's within its quotes when the condition is false. If the condition is false, it will print whatever is within the curly brackets. Else, it will move on to the else if statements because the condition was true. Now let's move on to some switch statements, and for that I need to create a new file. So what exactly is a switch statement? A switch statement allows a variable to be tested for equality against a list of certain values. Each value in this instance is called a case, and the variable being switched on is checked for each switch case. We'll go through some examples shortly, but basically it means we have a variable with a value. It then uses the switch statement to go through each case to determine which case is correct and then display a value accordingly. So let's go in and create a new file, and we'll call this file, let's call it switch.pl. And once I go into the file, I just want to create the shebang statement and make sure we start with that. And we may need to import the switch module, which I will show you how to do shortly. I have forgotten a character, so I'll just go back and put the exclamation mark here, which then makes the file work correctly. To use the switch module, I type in use switch, and then we want to type in the command like this. So the statement actually looks like switch, and then we have a value in brackets, and then we put in the case statements. So switch, and I'll just put the brackets in for now, and we'll plug in the values shortly. And then we need to put in the case statements that look like this. Within brackets, curly brackets, case 1, and then case 2, and then case 3. So we'll look at 3 different switch cases. And what happens is we need to put individual curly brackets for each case, determining which one will run based on the value. So let's put in the curly brackets here so you can actually see what it looks like. So case 1, we have the open curly brackets, close curly brackets. Case 2 will be the same with the curly brackets, and case 3 would have that as well. So whatever the statement is will go within those quotes. So once these are done, let's go in and start giving a value, and we'll look at some numbers in this particular example. We want to print something to the screen. So if the value is 1, we want to print number is 1. If we have the value of 2, in this particular example, if case 2, we want to print number is 2, and similarly for the value of 3. So let's call it $num equals 1, and let's go ahead and plug in some of those case statements. So as we have print number is 1, we want to copy that and also use the case statement. So print number is 2 for case 2. Print, easier for me to copy this, so let's just copy this across and paste it here, and then I'll paste it in case 3 as well. And let's adjust those values now. Let's change number is 1 to number is 3 for this particular case 3. And we also need to do that for the case 2 statement, which is 2. So number is 2 and number is 3. We also need to run the argument in the switch statement here. So we put in switch and within quotes or brackets $num. So it's going to check the value of num, and given that it's 1, it's going to print number is 1. It will look at the number in the variable $num and then print accordingly. So what we'll do now is let's go ahead and run the program and see the results, and hopefully those results will show which case it actually case statement runs. So I need to change the permission chmod +x to the file switch.pl, and what we'll also do is run this file now. It has the proper permissions, and what you'll note here is it cannot find the module. So what we need to do is go back to the command apt-get, and we need this particular module, which we will install in this way, apt-get, and we need to type install, and the module name is called libswitch-perl. So apt-get install libswitch-perl, and as you can see, that's installed. If I then run that particular file now, we should see the appropriate results. So let's go ahead and run that particular program again with the $switch.pl, and let's have a look at the results. Remember, the value for num was 1, and as you can see here, it's displaying number is 1. So this type of switch statement is used in events where we want user input. So depending on user input, whether the user enters 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., we can then run through the switch statement to see which case and which statement needs to be printed accordingly. So let's go ahead and change the variable value from 1 to 2, and let's have a look at the results that appear if the number is 2. As we saw when it printed number is 1, let's go ahead and run the program, and as you see, it tells us number is 2. So it's gone through the switch statement, looked at case 2, and then printed number is 2 because the value in the variable num was 2. So imagine a scenario where we ask for values from the user. If the value is 1 that the user selects, then we print number 1, etc. If it's number 2, it prints 2. If it's 3, it prints 3. Now, this is with numbers. What happens if we want to use strings? We can do that very simply by going in and replacing num. This time, let's call it the string A, the letter A. So when the user types in A, it's going to go to the switch statement, and we'll call case A, print something for A, and for B, or case B, print something for B, and case C, print something for C. So if we have the user entering in C, we can then put in selected menu is C. And then we want to do the same thing for case B. Selected menu is B. And for the value of case A, we want that to say selected menu is A. So this is how we use the switch statement for strings, where we can now say if the user enters A, B, or C, then print the appropriate statements based on the switch case. Now we also need to create a catch-all statement. For example, I'll show you that in a second. where the value is A here, we can see now it says selected menu A. If we change that to B, it would then print B. And if we change it to C, it would do the same thing and print selected menu is C. So this is how switch statements work. I need to just put in the catch-all statement. So if there's nothing that is correct, so let's assume we had something like D or F, we can have an else statement here which says else print something else to the screen. So what we're saying is if the letter is D or Z or X or P, we want to print no selection done. Actually, maybe I'll change that to say wrong selection done or wrong selection entered. Doesn't matter, it's just something to put in here to say that the statement, the switch case statement, did not find a correct value, and then print something else. So we haven't got a D in the case statements here. So if we ran this, we should see a message that says wrong selection done. So let's go ahead and do that. And as you can see here, it says wrong selection done. So for example, if we're creating a little menu-based script, if the user presses A, we could then show up menu A. If the user typed in B, we could then show menu B and C as well. And if they pressed any other character that was not included in the switch statements, we will print wrong selection done. Now let's move on to some if statements, but in this instance we are going to use a question mark to replace the if else statement. So for that, let's create a new file and let's exit this and show how we can use the question mark option to replace the if else statement. Now for that, we're going to look at a number 10 again, but let's type in vim and if else with a Q, so question mark, how to use a question mark, and I need to type in the shebang statement, so let's just put that in. And what I've just noticed is that I have called or named the file incorrectly, so this Perl statement won't work. So let me just save this file and go and rename the file. To rename a file, you simply type in mv and if else q to if else q.pl, and then we go in and type in vim if else q.pl, and now we can see the shebang statement working correctly. The expression for the if else statement will look something like this. So if we type in exp1, so expression 1, and then we put in a question mark, what it's basically saying is check expression 1 whether it has a true value or a false value. So the question mark asks the program to check expression 1, and then I have a true value followed by a false value. So if it's true, execute the tr part of the code. If it's false, execute the fl part of the code. This is the general syntax. So simply we have an expression 1, whatever that expression 1 is, we're then asking it to check that expression, and it either returns a true value or a false value, and then gives us the appropriate results. The good thing about this is we can write if-else statements in a single line as we have here. Now let's go ahead and look at how we can use an actual example. As I mentioned, we want to have the number, and let's use a number of 10 right now. So we're going to check whether the value is less than 10. If it's less than 10, print a particular result to the screen, and if false, then print something else to the screen. So let's go ahead and create a variable a, and let's give the variable a value of 10. So $a equals 10, And then what we want to do, go ahead and create another variable, and this time we want to store the result of a if-else statement. So let's call it result, $result equals, and we want to use the shortened version of the if-else statement. So we'll type in $result equals, and we need to put the expression that we want to check for. So $result equals, and we put in the expression or argument we are testing for, and we'll put that in brackets. $A is less than 10. So if we are checking for A being less than 10, and then what we want to do for the true condition is print something. We'll put the question mark here, which then indicates to check that expression, and the true value will then say we want to print something to the screen, which would be A is less than 10, and in a false condition we want to type in A is greater than 10. So here we have the value of A is 10. We are now checking the expression, is A less than 10? If it is, print A is less than 10, and if it's not less than 10, then print A is greater than 10. And now we want to print the result to the screen, so print $result, and that will give us the appropriate result of whether it is less than 10 or greater than 10. We'll just put a new line in here so it has a space between the lines. So again, A equals 10 in the first line. We're then checking a condition. If A is less than 10, true condition, A is less than 10, false condition, A is greater than 10. So it's either the first part's going to be executed or the second portion of that statement. And let's go ahead and print the result to the screen. So I'll save this file and print it. We should see the result, A is less than 10. We'll change the value of A shortly and then see what happens if A is less than 10. So let's make it 5 because 10 would cause an error. It's not less than or greater than. Let's look at 5. And if we run this program now, we should see that A is less than 10, which is the result we expected. Now if we change A to 15, we can go ahead and check whether it is showing the less than 10 or greater than 10. We looked at A equals 5, and that's why we got the first part of the condition met. So having it as 15 should make the second part of that statement print. So let's have a look at this. A is greater than 10. So what we've been able to do in this video is look at the switch and case statements, and now looking at the short version of the if-else statement using a question mark, and then a true condition and a false condition is printed depending on what the result is. So in this way we are able to use an if-else statement without using if and else, using simple question marks. I would advise you to practice with if-else statements first, and once you're confident in the rest of the statements, you can go ahead and use the question mark option to make it a bit easier, and the code can all be written in one line. In the next video, we will look at loops in Perl and how we can use loops effectively. Basically, loops will be able to allow us to execute certain parts of the code a number of times, which is very handy in Perl when you want to automate certain aspects. So we'll get started with loops in the next video. But in this video, we've looked at switch statements with basically numbers as well as strings. And now let's move on to loops and how to effectively run code multiple times.